My fiancée and her parents mocked my late mother publicly after I funded everything, so I ended the wedding, sold assets and cut ties now. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and when I got engaged, I genuinely believed that stepping up financially was how you proved love and commitment. I grew up watching my mother stretch nothing into something, and after she passed, I carried this quiet belief that being dependable was how you earned your place in people's lives. So when I proposed, I didn't hesitate. I felt proud, like I was finally building the family I'd lost. My fiancée came from a family obsessed with standards and appearances. Everything had to look right. The right venue, the right guest list, the right story to tell other people. Her parents talked a lot about how things are done and what people expect, and I listened carefully, nodding, taking mental notes. I wanted to fit. I wanted them to see me as worthy. When they hinted at costs, I filled in the gaps without being asked. I paid the venue deposit first. Then catering. Then decor upgrades because the basic package would look cheap in photos. I covered her dress when the price somehow doubled after alterations. When her parents mentioned unexpected costs, I transferred money before the sentence even finished. Each payment felt like a brick laid toward belonging. In private, they praised me. Not loudly. Not proudly. Quietly. "You're reliable," her mother would say, smiling like it was a compliment. Her father once clapped my shoulder and said, "You're useful. You handle things." I remember standing there, heart racing, mistaking that tone for acceptance. I told myself this was how respect looked in their world. At night, I'd sit alone scrolling through invoices, thinking about my mom and how she always believed giving was love. I convinced myself sacrifice was just the entry fee. If I kept showing up, kept paying, kept proving myself, I'd finally belong. I didn't notice how conditional their warmth was, only how quickly it faded the moment money wasn't on the table. The first cracks didn't show up as fights. They showed up as jokes. Small ones. Casual ones. The kind people laugh off so you feel stupid for reacting. Her parents would make comments about backgrounds and upbringing, always wrapped in polite smiles. Her mother once said, "You turned out well, considering," and then laughed like it was charming. I laughed too, even though my chest tightened. My fiancée told me I was reading too much into it. "They're just blunt," she said, brushing it off while scrolling on her phone. "They don't mean anything by it." I wanted to believe her. Weddings are stressful, everyone says dumb things under pressure. So I swallowed it and kept moving forward. My late mother came up in odd ways. Not directly at first. Just references. "Well, no one really taught you how these things work," her father said once, gesturing vaguely. Another time her mom said, "Families with strong maternal figures usually understand etiquette better." Each time, I felt that familiar ache, grief mixed with shame, but I told myself they didn't know better. The spending didn't slow down. It accelerated. There were sudden expectations I was never asked about, just informed of. Extra guests. Upgraded menus. A bigger rehearsal dinner because our side has certain standards. When I hesitated, even briefly, the room would go quiet. Then my fiancé would sigh and say, "I thought you wanted us to look good." So I paid. Again. And again. Each time telling myself this was temporary. That once the wedding was over, things would settle. That this was just the cost of merging families. But something shifted inside me. I started noticing how warmth followed money like a shadow. How praise came only after payment confirmations. How my presence mattered less than my usefulness. I felt it most when I imagined my mother sitting across from them, hearing these comments, watching me smile through them. I told myself endurance was strength. That staying quiet was maturity. That if I just held on a little longer, I'd cross some invisible finish line where I'd finally be treated like family. I didn't realize yet that the finish line kept moving, and that they were watching to see how far I'd crawl to reach it. It didn't happen all at once. That's what scares me the most looking back. It was gradual, almost polite. Her parents stopped asking if I could help and started telling me what needed to be paid. At first it came through my fiancé. Then, slowly, my phone started lighting up directly with messages from them. Short ones. Transactional. No greetings. Just numbers and deadlines. Her father called me one afternoon while I was at work. He didn't ask how I was. He said, "We need the remaining balance for the florist by Friday." When I hesitated, he laughed lightly and said, "You're the man now. This stuff falls on you." I remember staring at my monitor, heart pounding, feeling like I'd just been assigned a role I never agreed to audition for. I dipped into savings I swore I'd protect after my mom died. Money she'd helped me set aside when she was still alive, telling me, "This is your safety net. Don't let anyone touch it." I transferred it anyway, telling myself this was different. This was family. This was for a future. Gratitude started disappearing. Payments were acknowledged with thumbs up emojis or curt, "Got it." No thank yous. No conversations. Just the next request. It was like once I proved I'd pay without pushing back, the expectation solidified. I wasn't a partner, I was a resource. My fiancée stopped checking in about how I felt. When I mentioned stress, she'd say, "My parents are under pressure too," like that settled it. Any concern I raised somehow turned into me being selfish. I started feeling guilty for even noticing the imbalance. Late at night, I'd sit in the dark with my laptop open, bank statements glowing back at me. The numbers scared me, but what scared me more was how numb I felt approving each transfer. Like I was watching myself from the outside, slowly being emptied out. I told myself once the wedding was paid off, things would change. That respect would come later. That this was just a phase. What I didn't know yet was that they weren't testing my generosity anymore. They were testing how much of myself I was willing to give up, and how quietly I'd do it. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. A chance for both families, what was left of mine, and all of theirs, to sit together before the wedding and feel like something official was finally happening. The restaurant was upscale, dimly lit, all polished wood and soft music that made everything feel more expensive than it needed to be. I paid for the entire table without thinking. That was just expected by now. Wine loosened the room. Laughter got louder. Conversations blurred together. At first, the comments were subtle, her mother joking about how, luckily, I'd learned to dress well, how money cleans up a lot of rough edges. People laughed. I smiled, jaw tight, telling myself not to ruin the mood. Then her father leaned back in his chair, glass in hand, and said, "You know, it's impressive how far you've come." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Given where you started." His eyes flicked around the table like he was inviting others to join in. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Someone asked what he meant, and instead of letting it go, he laughed. "Well," he said, "when you don't have a proper upbringing, you have to compensate somehow." His gaze landed on me. Usually with money. The table went quiet. I waited, actually waited, for my fiancée to say something. To step in. To defend me. She just took a sip of her drink and stared at her plate. The clink of her fork sounded impossibly loud. Then her mother added, smiling, "It's not his fault." Without his mother around, who was there to teach him better? My chest dropped. It felt like the air had been knocked out of me. My ears rang. I could barely hear the rest of the table. Every face blurred, except hers, still silent. I forced a laugh I don't remember deciding to make. I nodded, like I was agreeing with them. Inside, something cracked open. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a fault line shifting deep underground. In that moment, I understood this wasn't carelessness or stress. This was deliberate. This was who they were when they felt comfortable. And for the first time, I wondered what kind of future I was actually buying into, and what it was already costing me. I thought that dinner was as bad as it would get. I was wrong. Her father leaned forward, elbows on the table, like he was about to deliver a punchline everyone was supposed to enjoy. He swirled his wine slowly and said, "Honestly, if your mother were still alive, maybe she'd have taught you not to buy affection." Then he chuckled. But I guess death cuts lessons short. The words didn't register at first. They hovered in the air, unreal, like I'd misheard them. Then my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. My hands went cold. I remember staring at the condensation sliding down my glass, because looking at him felt impossible. I waited. I needed my fiancé to say something. Anything. To shut it down. To tell him to stop. To remind him my mother wasn't a joke, wasn't a talking point, wasn't a weapon. Instead, she laughed, quietly, awkwardly, and said, "Dad, that's enough," in the same tone you use when someone tells a bad joke, not when they cross a line. No apology followed. No correction. No defense. Her mother sighed and said, "We're all just being honest here." Then she looked at me and added, "You're sensitive about this topic. You always have been." Something inside me went completely still. I realized, all at once, that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress. It wasn't alcohol. They knew exactly what they were doing. And worse, my fiancée knew too. She had chosen comfort over me. Image over loyalty. Silence over respect. I felt stupid for every late night, every transfer, every time I told myself this was temporary. I saw the pattern clearly now. My grief made me exploitable. My generosity made me controllable. My mother's absence made me fair game. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood there staring at my reflection, barely recognizing the man looking back. My eyes were hollow. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I whispered, "She wouldn't want this," over and over, like a lifeline. When I walked back to the table, they were already talking about seating arrangements, like nothing had happened. And that's when I knew something fundamental had shifted. I didn't belong here. I never had. I left that restaurant calm on the outside. I thanked everyone. I smiled. I even paid the bill. But inside, I was hollowed out, like something vital had been scooped clean and left behind. The drive home was quiet. My fiancée talked about traffic and timelines and how stressed her parents were. I barely heard her. Every word from that table replayed in my head on a loop. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, my mother's face flashing into my mind in fragments, her laugh, her hands, the way she used to tell me, "Don't let people shrink you just because you're kind." I felt grief hit me in a way it hadn't in years. Not sharp. Heavy. Crushing. Like I'd failed her somehow by letting strangers weaponize her death. By morning, something had shifted. The panic was gone. In its place was a cold, steady focus. I opened my laptop and started going through everything. Contracts. Deposits. Cancellation policies. Ownership clauses. I didn't tell my fiancé what I was doing. I didn't argue. I didn't confront anyone. I just read. Carefully. Methodically. Line by line. It felt like planning an escape while everyone else thought I was still asleep. Every number I saw made my chest tighten, but it also made things clearer. This wasn't just emotional abuse. It was structural. Built into expectations. Into roles. Into the quiet assumption that I would always pay, always absorb, always stay quiet. My fiancé noticed I was distant and asked what was wrong. I told her I was tired. That work was stressful. She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and went back to wedding spreadsheets. Watching her plan felt surreal, like she was arranging furniture in a house that was already on fire. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt resolved. For the first time since my mom died, I wasn't trying to earn a place at someone else's table. I was figuring out how to leave it entirely. And the more I planned in silence, the more dangerous that decision started to feel, for everyone except me. I didn't plan the confrontation. It happened because she cornered me one evening, laptop open, wedding budget pulled up like evidence. She asked why I hadn't sent the last payment yet. Her tone wasn't worried. It was irritated. Like I'd missed a deadline at work. I took a breath and told her we needed to talk, not about money, but about that dinner. The room felt tight, like the walls were listening. I told her exactly what her father said. I told her how it felt hearing my mother's death turned into a joke. My voice shook despite how calm I tried to sound. I waited for empathy. For anger on my behalf. For something. She sighed. She said I was taking it too personally. That her dad has a dark sense of humor. That her mom didn't mean it like that. Then she said the sentence that made my stomach drop, "You can't expect my parents to walk on eggshells forever." I asked her why she didn't defend me. She looked genuinely confused. "I didn't want to make a scene," she said. "It was a public place." As if my humiliation was less important than appearances. As if silence was the mature choice. When I told her I felt used, she laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, and said, "Used? You're the one who offered to pay for everything." She reminded me that I wanted this wedding. That her parents had standards. That this was just how families like hers operated. Families like hers. That's when I realized she didn't see my money as generosity. She saw it as obligation. As proof I owed them entry. And when I mentioned pulling back financially, even temporarily, her expression changed. The warmth vanished. Her voice sharpened. She said I was being selfish. That I was sabotaging our future. That her parents would be furious. Not hurt. Furious. I stood there listening to her talk about embarrassment and expectations and how much had already been promised. She never once asked how I was holding up. Never mentioned my mother. Never apologized. By the time she finished, I knew this conversation wasn't about healing anything. It was about control. And I could feel the distance between us widening into something that couldn't be crossed back over. That night, after the argument, I sat alone on the edge of the bed while she slept like nothing had happened. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. Mine felt shallow, uneven, like my chest couldn't decide whether to cave in or explode. I stared at the wall until the numbers on the clock blurred together, my mind replaying every moment that led me here. This was my lowest point. Not the dinner. Not the insult. This. Realizing that the person I planned to marry didn't see my pain as real, only inconvenient. I felt stripped of dignity. Ashamed that I'd allowed myself to be reduced to a wallet with emotions attached. I thought about my mother again, about how hard she fought to raise me with self-respect, how she used to say, "Never let anyone convince you that love has a price tag." The irony nearly broke me. I went into the bathroom and locked the door, sitting on the cold tile floor with my back against the tub. The light buzzed overhead. My phone vibrated with a notification, another message from her parents in the group chat, asking when the next payment would be sent. No, "Hope you're okay." No acknowledgement of anything that had happened. Just money. My hands shook as I held the phone. For a moment, I seriously considered sending the payment just to make the anxiety stop. Just to buy silence. Just to keep everything from blowing up. That urge scared me more than anything else. It showed me how conditioned I'd become to sacrificing myself to avoid conflict. I felt small. Cornered. Like I was standing at the edge of a cliff with everyone behind me pushing and smiling like it was normal. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just felt empty, like all the emotion had burned out, leaving behind something numb and dangerous. I realized that if I went through with this wedding, this would be my life. Every boundary mocked. Every loss minimized. Every sacrifice expected. Around dawn, as the sky outside began to lighten, I made a decision so quietly it almost felt unreal. No speeches. No ultimatums. No dramatic exit. Just action. I stood up, unlocked my phone, and opened my banking app, not to send money, but to stop it. And once that thought settled in, there was no going back. By the time the sun came up, I wasn't panicking anymore. I felt eerily calm, like my body had finally accepted what my mind had been avoiding for months. I showered, got dressed, and went to work like it was any other day. I even kissed her on the forehead before I left. She smiled, already talking about a meeting with the wedding planner later that afternoon. I nodded along, knowing I was already living in a different reality. At my desk, instead of opening emails, I opened documents. Contracts first. Venue agreement. Catering. Rentals. I read every cancellation clause slowly, carefully, like my future depended on the fine print, because it did. Some deposits were non-refundable. Others weren't. Some payments hadn't cleared yet. That detail made my heart thump harder than anything else had in weeks. During lunch, I called my bank and froze the account I'd been using for wedding expenses. My voice was steady when I explained. I surprised myself with how firm I sounded. After that, I called my financial advisor, the one my mother insisted I keep even when I thought I didn't need help anymore. I didn't give him the full story. I just said, I need to liquidate some assets. Quickly. He paused and asked if I was sure. I thought about the dinner. About the laughter. About my fiancé's face when I asked for support and got excuses instead. Yes, I said. I'm sure. One by one, I started pulling the plug. I emailed vendors with short, polite messages. I canceled appointments. I stopped future payments before anyone could lock them in. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I handled everything quietly, efficiently, like I was dismantling something dangerous before it collapsed on its own. My phone buzzed non-stop. Missed calls. Texts asking if something was wrong. Messages from her parents growing more demanding by the hour. I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed everything in place before the fallout started. As the day went on, something unexpected happened. With every cancelled transaction, the weight on my chest lifted a little more. Fear was still there, but underneath it was relief. Real, undeniable relief. By the time I drove home that evening, I knew the wedding was already over. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't announce the cancellation in a dramatic way. I didn't post anything. I didn't call a family meeting. I waited until the last vendor confirmed in writing that everything on my end was officially stopped. Only then did I tell her. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I got home, surrounded by printouts and color swatches. She looked up, smiling, and asked if I'd finally sent the payment her parents were waiting on. I told her the wedding was cancelled. At first, she laughed. Actually laughed. Like I'd made a bad joke. Then she saw my face and the color drained out of hers. What do you mean, cancelled? She asked, her voice rising. I told her calmly that I'd ended the contracts, sold assets, and frozen accounts. That there was no wedding anymore. She exploded. She yelled that I was humiliating her. That her parents were calling non-stop. That people were already asking questions. She accused me of doing this to punish her, of being cruel, of ruining her life. When I brought up the dinner, again, she snapped that I was obsessed with it and that everyone else had moved on. That's when her parents arrived. Unannounced. Furious. Her father shouted that I'd embarrassed their family. Her mother cried loudly, saying I'd wasted their time and reputation. They demanded explanations, refunds, apologies. No one asked why. No one mentioned my mother. It was all about appearances and money and what people would think. Something in me finally cracked open, but instead of anger, it was clarity. I told them exactly what happened at that dinner. Word for word. I said my mother's name out loud. I said how it felt. I said I would never marry into a family that mocked the dead and taught their daughter to stay silent. The room went quiet. Her father tried to laugh it off. Her mother called me dramatic. But the story was already out. Mutual friends started texting. Questions spread. The narrative they'd relied on, me as the reliable provider, began to collapse. For the first time, I wasn't the one scrambling to clean up a mess. They were. And I could feel the balance of power shifting in a way they weren't prepared for. After that night, everything went quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The yelling stopped. The accusations slowed. What replaced them was silence so sharp it felt deliberate. I woke up the next morning to dozens of unread messages, some angry, some pleading, some suddenly polite. I didn't open them. I knew if I did, I'd be pulled back into explaining myself to people who never listened in the first place. I blocked her parents first. No dramatic speech. No final message. Just gone. Then I blocked her. That part hurt more than I expected. Not because I missed her, but because it made everything final. Like closing a door I'd been holding open with my foot for months, even while it crushed me. The apartment felt different without the constant buzz of wedding talk. Quieter. Emptier. I packed my things slowly, deliberately. Every item I put into a box felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I found old photos of my mom while sorting through paperwork, pictures I hadn't looked at in years because they hurt too much. This time, they didn't hurt the same way. They felt grounding. Friends reached out, cautiously at first. A few apologized for not speaking up sooner. Some admitted they'd always felt uncomfortable with how her parents treated me. Hearing that stung, but it also validated what I'd been gaslighting myself out of acknowledging. The strangest part was how quickly the warmth disappeared once the money did. No more checking in. No concern. No attempts at reconciliation unless it involved finances or appearances. That confirmed everything I needed to know. Late one evening, sitting alone in the quiet, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad in the way I thought I'd be. I felt steady. Like I'd finally stepped off a treadmill I didn't know how to stop. I lit a candle for my mother that night. I talked to her out loud, telling her I was sorry it took me so long. That I finally chose myself. That I understood now what she meant by dignity. But even as peace settled in, I knew there was one last thing left. Walking forward. And I wasn't sure yet what that would look like, only that I was done letting anyone buy or sell my worth ever again. It's been months now, and the quiet that once felt strange has become familiar, comforting, even. I wake up without dread sitting on my chest. My phone doesn't buzz with demands or passive-aggressive reminders. There's no countdown clock to a future that would have cost me everything. For the first time in a long time, my life feels like it actually belongs to me. I won't pretend it was easy after the dust settled. There were days I questioned myself. Days I replayed everything, wondering if I should have handled it differently, if I overreacted, if I burned something that could have been fixed. But every time those thoughts crept in, I remembered the dinner. The laughter. The silence. The way my mother's death was treated like currency. And the doubt faded. I rebuilt slowly. Financially first, tight budgets, long nights, undoing months of damage. Emotionally second. I started therapy, something I'd avoided for years because I thought strength meant handling things alone. Turns out, strength looks more like honesty than endurance. I learned how easily love can turn transactional when you're willing to pay for it. I visit my mother's grave now without that familiar knot of guilt. I tell her about my days. About the choices I'm making. About how I finally understood what she tried to teach me, not with lectures, but with how she lived. She never begged to belong. She never let anyone measure her worth in dollars. People still ask what happened. I keep it simple. It ended because it needed to. The ones who understand don't push. The ones who don't were never really listening anyway. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. And I didn't need revenge in the way I once imagined. Walking away with my self-respect intact was the justice I didn't know I was allowed to choose. I thought providing made me family. Now I know something better. Love doesn't require payment. Respect doesn't come with conditions. And anyone who asks you to buy your place in their life has already decided you don't belong. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes, it's survival.